Hello, and welcome to the PREM1R podcast. I'm Remi DeSmith, lead mental coach and founder of PREM1R Motivation. Here at PREM1R, we really are excited to bring our ideas and our mentalities into the podcast format. A lot of what we've done in the past has been individual coaching and more of just brief tips. So the whole team here is very excited to get all these ideas into a cohesive unit of a podcast format. Jumping right into it today, the main focus of today's episode is going to be about self-talk. How do you hear yourself? And how you are actively planning to and move forward with your self-talk. Starting right at the top of it, I want to ask a question about how do you talk to yourself? It seems like a fairly simple question in the sense that you probably want to be talking good to yourself. You want to say that, all right, I'm doing well. Why would you ever want to speak negatively about yourself? It seems like a very straightforward question. A lot of times though, when you actually break it down, and some of you may already feel this to a quite large degree, you do find yourself talking negatively about yourself in your own head, to yourself, right? This seems like something that's, why would you ever do that? From an outside perspective, of course. Internally, it makes perfect sense, right? An example of this is seen in other mediums, such as judgment. Whenever you see someone who has experienced trauma, for example, and you see, oh my goodness, I feel so bad for that person, I can't imagine what they're going through. If that same thing happened to you, you most likely would not give yourself the same circumstances and compassion that you give these other people. The same thing is true with self-talk. We so often end up being incredibly negative when referring to ourselves. We think that there are higher standards, and we hold ourselves to these unwritten rules, these arbitrary rules when speaking to ourselves and creating our own judgments. Ultimately, judgment and self-judgment and self-talk are internally linked. However, we can separate the self-talk part into a more direct category. Allow me to present this idea. Waking up in the morning, right? It's difficult to do, especially if you're pushing yourself, you're getting a good sleep schedule, but you need to get up early so you can get to work and do well. If you get up and you think to yourself, I'm not going to be able to do this, I'm not going to be able to do this, that's the only idea that's going to be in your mind, and nobody will correct it, right? You could be going through and actually doing the things that you need to do, getting up, brushing your teeth, making your breakfast, all of these steps. However, if you still believe in your mind that I can't do this, I'm not going to be able to do this, that's all you're going to hear. Most likely, if you continue to hear that on a long-term basis, you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to give up, and it's going to feel like you failed. However, if you wake up and you say to yourself, I'm able to do this, and then you see yourself executing upon those actions, it's a positive reward in relation to what you're seeing. It's a great example of just how powerful positive self-talk is and why it is so important. All of it comes from presentation and perspective. The perspective you have on something governs your life. You could think that you're awesome, or you could think that you're awful. Whichever one you end up being with and choosing, that's the one you're stuck with, and no one can change that. It doesn't matter how many external sources say contrary or objective things say no. Whatever you believe is ultimately what is going to be within your mind. So if you can change what's in your mind, all that you believe is going to change as well. I'm going to give you an example of personal anecdote. During the hockey season for myself in which I was playing, I was getting in a unhealthy relationship with myself about how much weight I was. The ultimate goal, of course, is to be as muscular and low fat as possible. The lower the fat you are, the more quick and agile you can be on the ice, and the more muscle you have, the stronger you are. What ultimately ended up happening was I took a negative approach to it. I didn't see myself as being successful in gaining muscle. I saw myself as overeating, having too high percentage of body fat, and still gaining muscle. If I ended up dropping that body fat and dropping the extra weight, I would have not been able to gain the muscle. It's a very delicate balance and a difficult one to think about, especially when there are objective neurological things involved, such as gaining weight versus muscle. In order to gain the muscle, I had to eat. When I ate, I felt guilty about it because my inner self-dialogue said that I was fat. By near all objective standards, I was not fat. I was sub 15% body fat and right in the 22 BMI for my age and height. However, what ended up happening was that I believed simply that I was fat. And that ended up causing a negative feedback loop. I'm not going to go into specifically what a negative feedback loop is in this podcast episode. However, just know it can be detrimental towards breaking out of it. What I ended up having to do was take objective measures into retraining my mindset. I found myself taking longer time at the gym, training harder, doing more and more and more. Subsequently, I ate more and more and more. The more calories I burned, the more I ate. And I continued on this loop. To break out of it, what ultimately had to happen was I needed to stop caring about it. And I did. I realized within myself that if I continued on this, what's the point? I burnt myself out. And there was nothing left. I was able to look at myself objectively and say, hey, here's the problem, here's the solution. I wasn't allowing my internal voice to bring me down negatively. All I was doing was simply viewing what I had as the past. That's what it was. Now I have the present and all the moments coming up that I can change that. If I focus on what I was last week, I can't move into the future. That is the power of self-talk. Self-talk can bring you all the way down. It can take you from 100 down to a 0. And it all stems from within yourself. I encourage you to take a look at your own self-talk. How do you speak to yourself? Do you view yourself as a success or a failure? I encourage you, no matter what your circumstances are, to view yourself as having potential. Potential means something that can happen. It may not be acted upon ever, and it may not ever be fulfilled. However, having potential means that you can make a change. Perhaps you're satisfied with where you're at. You have the potential to maintain that. You have the potential to fail maintaining that. Potential can go positive or negative. You have the potential for either. If you recognize that, then you can build a solid staircase. If you don't recognize that, your staircase is going to be floating in the middle of the air. You could be going up flights and flights of stairs, but you could be starting from a low point. You're going to have to do a lot more work if you started at 20 than if you started at 50 going to 100. Potential is a great thing, and if you remember that, your self-talk will build you those extra flights of stairs. I want to give a little bit of science to back up what I've been saying about this idea of if you believe that you're a failure and you have that negative mindset, the bad self-talk, we'll just say it in simple terms, then you're going to continue on that. I will go back to a study that was done at one point involving the placebo effect, where two control groups were given a milkshake. It was the same milkshake. One group was told it was healthy, one group was told it was not. Based upon that information, the groups ended up having different digestive processes and literal subjective emotions about how they felt about the milkshake after. The group that was told it was healthy ended up digesting it better, but they felt hungry afterwards. The group that was told it was indulgent ended up having a higher digestion of fat rate. However, they felt more satisfied after. What this means, and what it really shows, is that your mind has an incredible effect over what you believe and how you literally are. Jim Rohn once said, "Positive thinking won't get you anywhere, but it will get you much farther than negative thinking will." I believe this to be true, and I believe it can be applied to your own self-image and how you talk to yourself. Talking to yourself is something that we all do. Whether it is literally out loud, whether it is silently within your mind, your internal dialogue plays a massive role in how you view the world. Being able to have the positive self-dialogue will get you where you want to be. Think about it just in a subjective view at this point. Would you rather that the world told you you can't do it, you're not going to be able to, you're a failure on both subjective and objective levels? Or would you prefer there to be support? Granted, the world will never fully support you. There's always going to be that one person, that one group, whatever it may be, that they don't like you. They're going to tell you no matter what, and it may not even be anything you can control about it. It could be something that you had no control over ever and never will. The world is not entirely positive. The world is not entirely negative. Much like potential, it can go either way. But like potential, you can choose to view the positives or you can choose to view the negatives. Being able to influence your view of the world by using positive self-talk is such an incredible tool. If you can get up in the morning, like we said earlier, and think you can do it, you're going to be able to do whatever it is you set out to do that morning. If you get up and you think, this is impossible, I can't do it, you're not going to be able to. I've restated this point because it plays such a crucial role in understanding why self-talk is so important. You are in control of it. So why set yourself up to fail? Set yourself up for success. It's difficult. It is very difficult if you are in a negative feedback loop to get out of it. Even if you can recognize you are in a negative feedback loop of bad self-talk leading to bad actions which reaffirm that negative self-talk, it's still difficult to get out and get into that positive self-talk. So I encourage you to use other people. Use external sources. Use objective measures. Sometimes it may seem that, well, if I fail on this objective thing where it's like, I want to lose this much weight, and I miss that margin, Well, you failed. That was it. Going back to perspective, you still tried. And if you tried, that is all that matters. If you try with a genuine effort, you give 100%, and you didn't make it, that just means there's something more you can learn. It means you can improve who you are. Failing is not a bad thing, but continuing on that path and not wanting to succeed is a bad thing. Failure teaches us. Creating failure does not teach anything. Success teaches less than failure, but creating success does teach us quite a lot. Create the positive mindset for yourself. Use others. When I say use others, I mean in a positive way. Ask for help. Ask for self-affirmations. If you need somebody to tell you you can do it every day, ask them. I guarantee they're more than willing to help. You look back at this example in the beginning that we talked about with trauma, how you view somebody else and you think you're so empathetic towards them and sympathetic, and then you view yourself in that same situation and it seems just so hopeless, like you're going to never get out of it. The same thing is true about asking for help. People love to help. It's natural. It's a genuine, hardwired thing within our minds. We want to see others succeed and we want to be a part of that success. When we see others succeed and we weren't part of it, that's what's known as oftentimes jealousy. That's what it stems to. It's not even controllable sometimes, but that's what it is. So, the power of getting somebody to tell you you can do it. Writing down, literally on a piece of paper, I am worthy. I can do this. And just being around that message will get you to succeed. It will get you to believe it. Being around a mindset, a group, whatever it is, of positivity, it's going to infect you. The same thing is true with negativity. Look at the people, look at the things, look at the messages that surround you. They're going to influence how you talk to yourself, what you believe. I'm not saying it by any degree that anybody who has anything bad to say needs to be cut out. Oftentimes, bad critiques and things that say you're messing up are vital. If you only look at the good, you're never going to see your weaknesses. If you never see your weaknesses, you can't fix them. You need to see the good and the bad. But look at the messages that are around you. See what's influencing you. What are creating your thoughts? The idea of a thought seems like, oh yeah, I came up with that. In reality, no. Your brain came up with it. How did your brain come up with it? Think about that. Ultimately, we don't have control over our thoughts. Our thoughts are an indication of the visual, the touch, the sound, the sight, the smell, all of our senses. They create our thoughts. And anything that may visually remind us, or any sensory remind us of that, that's what comes up. A feeling. Anything at all. That's what ends up being the important part. All of these potential things are governed by you. You are in control of what media you watch. You're in control of what music you listen to, what podcasts you listen to, how you spend your time. All of these things influence your self-talk. And going back to the statement by Jim Rohn, positive thinking will get you much farther than negative thinking. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. For future ones, check out the PREM1R Podcast YouTube channel. We're also available on Spotify, Amazon Music, and working on getting more brands as well. Thank you for your time. Until the next one.